So, Steve, hit me, man. This is the first time we've been on the Red Hot mic in just about over a month. So, give us your good, bad, ugly. It's wonderful to see your digital face and hear your digital voice once again.
Likewise, across the ocean, across the thousands of miles. First of all, it's a highlight just coming back and being able to do this and join my partner. And I'm not going to say partner in crime. I'm going to say my partner in well-being. Yeah.
That's gangster, bro. Partner in well-being. Wow.
There you go. Yeah. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
Oh, come on, Dickens.
With apologies to Dickens. Yeah.
Tale of Two Cities. Let's go. Come on.
So the best of times. Wonderful, rejuvenating trip to Colorado. I love Colorado. I love the mountains. Did some hiking. Saw an old college friend. Just basked. I say in natural beauty, in the splendor of creation. It was lovely. Worst of times, had a really difficult death in the family. That it was kind of, and probably a lot of listeners can relate to this. It's like we sort of knew it was coming at some point, but figured it would be a few years from now, and then it just hit very suddenly, and nobody was ready for. I wasn't ready for it, and it's just really, really hard. It definitely hit home for me once again, the importance of so much of what we talk about on the show, the importance of social support and connection and caring and love, but also self-care, the importance of keeping to a routine, the importance of staying with regular physical activity and sunlight and just doing and sleep, healthy sleep, doing all the things to maintain more or less an emotional equilibrium despite being kind of heartbroken. And it is a part of life. It's one that hopefully we don't have to encounter face to face too often, but yeah. So thanks for asking. I'm doing well. I'm delighted to be back. So
yeah,
I want to hear.
And I think before we turn the microphone over to me, I just want to say, I do think it's interesting that whenever the hard times come, that's almost the most valuable time for you to continue those routines of self-care and those structures that you have in place, and actually the dividend that you get from living a therapeutic lifestyle, as we often talk about on the show, is when the hard times come, they often can provide a little bit of a guardrail for you to hold on to. Do you know what I mean? You're like, because when you're struck with particularly something like loss and grief, there is this sense of like, well, what on earth do I do now? And there is something quite comforting in having something to just be like, well, I guess I'll just do this thing that I always do, whether it's a morning walk or whether it's a gym. And of course, there's times to step back and let grief wash over you and stuff, but there is something very therapeutic and freeing about having a routine just to kind of like fall back into in those hard times as well,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, since you mentioned it, I've been thinking a little bit about a kind of idea that we get from medicine where physicians will talk about a kind of reservoir of physical health or physical well-being. And you see it again a lot with very old people where there's a kind of physical frailty that some people will acquire that basically is just a fancy medical way of saying they have no reserves. If anything hits them, it could be like a minor infection, it could be, whatever. They have no physical reserves and it could take them under. And other people, who have been, especially who have been really investing in their physical well-being, investing in their health. They've got, they've got that reserve of cardiovascular fitness and metabolic fitness and so forth. Well, there's a robustness and a resilience. They can be hit by some horrible virus or some, whatever the thing is, and they typically will bounce back pretty well. So I think that this is a great image, a great metaphor, and maybe even more than a metaphor. I think maybe just directly analogous to a kind of psychological buffer and resilience that if we are just doing the things every day to invest in our well-being, then when life throws something really, really painful, challenging, difficult our way, it's like, okay, we have the reserves to bounce back from that. And maybe even, to allow ourselves to experience the pain unmediated. In other words, we don't have to anesthetize it with alcohol or with a benzodiazepine or some other psychotropic drug. We can just experience the pain as it is, as a part of existence, and as something that we can actually learn from, maybe at some level, grow from. So anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
And I also and I put this forward quite gently, but I was having this conversation with a buddy of mine recently who also struggles a lot with depression and has throughout his life, and is doing a real great job of managing it and living a very therapeutic lifestyle to make it as minimal as possible. And we were kind of saying that, if you are familiar with the dragon of depression, and you're familiar with those extreme lows and a lot of things that can come with it, including the suicidal thoughts and low mood and the low energy and et cetera, sometimes whenever other types of tragedy hit you in life, it doesn't actually seem to be as severe because that's the arena that you kind of dance in. Yeah. And so through your depression, which is often seen as like a real, disability or a form of weakness, it actually can give you this real strong strength and resilience. And then it's also interesting to experience something like sadness in its purest form when you've lost something, as opposed to just like depression. And it's, I've experienced something recently where I was like, wow, this is like just sadness. There's no depression attached to it. Yeah. Like, this is so strange to just have one bit and not the other bit. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I think, unfortunately, for many people who battle depression, if they have not returned to full health, if they've not fully healed, then they live in a often, and this has been my experience having worked with hundreds of depressed patients over the years, that they live in a kind of state of existential dread of, if something makes me very sad, as life will do sometimes, then that carries with it the very real risk of tipping me over into a full-blown up. Because, for them, anything that puts them in that headspace at all carries great risk. And so to me as a clinician, it's an extraordinarily hopeful sign for someone who's battled depression to be able to now differentiate and say, oh, yeah. There's a massive difference between everyday sadness, which is part of the human condition, versus the full debilitating syndrome of depressive illness, which, is an illness.
Awesome. Well, there goes our 5-minute announcement episode.
It's okay. No, this has been great. Okay, so it'll be 15 because I want to hear Hugh. I want to hear about your month off, because I know there have been exploits, and my burning question right now is, how many of these exploits are you willing to share?
Well, there will be one gentle exploit that I will share that is very family. Okay. It's very family friendly because it was about family and friends. Okay, so we had a lovely month off. Lovely to get some R&R. We had amazing weather over here, which is so rare, and so we just embraced that and soaked it up. It was as high as 27 degrees Celsius. Can you believe it? That is so hot for here.
Hey, for our non-Celsius listeners, for our audience in the States, 27 Celsius. I'm going to just ballpark it in my head.
It's going to be the exact one in front of me, so this will be fun.
Just give us okay. I'm gonna ballpark it at about 90.
It was 80.6. So do you know what?
Wait, that's it?
Yeah, let me just double check. I don't want to like blast you here on the podcast. Yeah, the Google computer says 80.6.
Okay.
Which, to your point, is that it? Not that hot, but for the Irish skin, oh baby, does that feel good? Yeah, it does not get warmer than that. And so, yeah, we had family visiting from Germany. We also had family visiting from Australia. So the house was crowded. I was actually sleeping outside for a week, which I absolutely loved. I was like, mate, I've never felt like such a hunter-gatherer in my life.
I was going to say, you're going full paleo there.
Yeah, this is full therapeutic lifestyle. You've radicalized me. I'll never be the same after reading your book. And so, yep, lovely times going to the beach, climbing mountains, going to the sauna, of course, relaxing, going to parks, just usual family stuff, eating great food, making some special memories. Our little daughter, she's just turned 2, so she's just like at the stage where everything is incredible and everything is a first, and first time going on a carousel and first time seeing someone go on a roller coaster and in the sea. And so, yeah, just genuinely, it's the stuff that childhood memories are made of. So we had a really lovely summer. Thank you for asking.
Oh yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Okay, so Hugh, what? Unless you want to share another exploit, because we're all here for it.
Exploits are done. My hope is to aim for the 15-minute mark at this point.
All right. So then, fair enough. So what can we expect over the next few episodes?
Yeah. So as you probably have seen, as you've been listening to this episode, we have the transition is complete. You're now listening to the Depression Cure podcast. We've got a new graphic. We've got our title updated. We've got our description updated. Our website is transferring over to depressioncure.co. And we are taking the deep dive. We're narrowing the focus. We're lasering down onto the topic of depression. We're really, really excited about it. As you maybe heard in the last episode, Depression Cure is the title of Steve's book, which has sold hundreds of thousands of copies around the world. It's how I first came across Steve. The book changed my life. I then fanboyed and reached out to him. That's how this podcast has gone today, or exists today. And Steve actually is just in the process of creating a second edition of that book. And so we thought, look, we want to focus on depression. The listeners have spoken loud and clear through messages on Patreon, emails sent through, even just people locally that have stopped me and talked to me about the podcast. They're like, look, we love everything, but we really love your depression stuff. And we're like, okay, the stars are aligning. The universe has spoken. Steve's got this new deal with the book. Let's just do it. Okay, let's just go for Depression Cure. And so over the next few episodes, we are settling into this new brand. We've decided to take it as a bit of a fresh start. So the next 2 episodes are going to be actually a little bit more about our story. We've shared it in bits and pieces throughout the 30 episodes, but we're going to take a dedicated episode per person. So we're going to have Steve's story, we're going to have Hugh's story, and then we're going to jump straight into some Q&A episodes, which we've got a nice build-up of questions, especially since we took that month off. And we also are going to be rolling out some of our first waves of regular interviews on the topic of depression with some of Steve's incredible star-studded network. These guys are the Avengers of depression. And then also some people like myself who have experienced depression firsthand and have figured out ways to treat, manage, and in some cases even eradicate it from their lives. So this is some of the many exciting exploits and flavors that you can expect over the next couple of weeks for Depression Cure podcast. There you go, Steve. That's my pitch.
Yeah. No, that was fantastic. So just to summarize for folks, as they're thinking about, well, what's the pod going to look like going forward? Excuse me, even just beyond the next few weeks. I'm getting choked up just thinking about it.
What's it going to look like? Masterful, like professor trick, you just lean into it. You're like, yeah, this is part of the bit.
Exactly. You know what? It's that's decades of experience in the making. So every month, our basic plan is to have 1 episode per month that's an interview with someone in the field or someone who's a fellow traveler to tell their story. Every month, we're going to do 1 Q&A episode. Every month, we're going to have 2 regular episodes on some topic related to depression. But as regular listeners know, depression is co-occurring commonly with any number of other psychological disorders, forms of distress, forms of mental illness, forms of mental health challenge. So we're going to be covering still a lot of bases. But the through line, the common thread in all of it is going to be this staggering societal burden of depressive illness that now is the number one cause of disability worldwide. Believe it or not, the largest burden of work-related disability, one of the largest causes of death, especially for young and middle-aged people. You might be thinking, wait a minute, causes of death? Through depression-linked suicide, of course, and we now know that over 1 million people end their own lives every single year globally, and so that's going to be the through line. We have kind of rebranded a little bit, but in a way, I want to reassure all of you that it's going to be the same basic podcast that hopefully you've come to know and love. So that's our plan moving forward.
Yeah, look, and just to give it to you straight up, Steve is a multifaceted guy and would be very bored if we just did one thing.
Oh, no.
I am exactly the same. I like to have lots of different things. And the kind of, on a theoretical level, I think the thing that attracts us both about depression is that it is so multifaceted and that the treatment to it is the same. It's really looking at the whole being. And so, we've niched down from a branding perspective, but you can still expect an exciting adventure into the weird and wonderful parts of the brain and the body and the psyche and the soul and the human condition, I suppose, that we love talking about and we love exploring. So, yeah, look, I've got nothing else to say other than it's good to be back. Thank you so much for picking us up again. We look forward to spending the next couple of episodes with you. Steve, you're looking good. You're looking pretty bronzed. I can already see the difference in our countries, because this time of year I'm starting to look a little bit paler. The light is already starting to fade. I'm recording outside today for those of you who aren't watching the video, and I can just see from a color perspective here, like winter is coming, but I'm ready. I'm equipped and I'm excited to do it together. You got your cod liver oil at the ready. You got your vitamin D supplement. Ireland is a magical place, but not a place where one typically goes to work on their suntan or their vitamin D status. So, this is true. This is true.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been delightful to be back in the saddle, and we'll look forward to joining you all or having you join us next time. So until then, everyone, be well.
Peace out, guys.